In this video, I want to share an experiment or a proof of concept that I've been working on in case anyone finds it useful. But for a bit of background, let me just say that in our most recent 3 videos, we basically followed this guide that the Elastic team has provided. And in this guide, we use Docker Compose to set up the Elastic Stack. And if I scroll down a bit, you'll see that in our projects, or in our most recent 3 videos, we use the Docker Compose to set up all these different services. And I'm just going to switch over to my PowerPoint presentation in a moment because it'll show the same thing with a few additional details. Okay, so this is what we set up in our most recent 3 videos. The first thing we did was we used the service to set up some SSL certificates that will be used by every other service down here. And then once those certificates were ready, we create the Elasticsearch service. And once Elasticsearch is ready, we start up the Kibana service. And once Kibana is ready, that's when we can create all these other services. An important thing to note is that when I created all these services, I had to rely on one user account to do all this, which is the default super user account that comes with your Elasticsearch installation. So that being the Elastic user. In my experiment, I want to automate the creation of a different user for every single one of these services. And when I create that new user, I'm going to store their credentials in a Keystore, because once the credentials are in a Keystore, they're not in plain text format, and it's not going to be easy for humans to decipher. So for example, once the Elasticsearch service is ready, I'm actually going to spin up another container or another service that simply does some curl and API requests to create a new Kibana user. And once I have that Kibana user, I store the credentials in the Kibana Keystore. And once that Kibana user and Keystore is created, then I'll go ahead and start up the Kibana service using those credentials. And likewise, for every single one of these other services, I use a similar approach. With MetricBeat, I'll set up a MetricBeat user, and I'll store its credentials in a Keystore, in the MetricBeat Keystore. Same with FileBeat. FileBeat has its own Keystore. Logstash has its own Keystore. And for the Elastic Agent Fleet Server and APM, they don't have a Keystore, but I'll set up a separate APM user. And the Fleet Server itself does encrypt some of its secrets, which isn't as easy for you to access or for a bad actor to access. We will let the Fleet Server manage some of those secrets. So that's basically my experiment. And I've already put all my code up in this repository here in case anyone wants to look at it and let me know if it seems to work for you as well. Let's actually just check it out onto my Red Hat machine over here and see if it actually works. So if I look here, you can see all my code here. It's just based off of the previous project. And let's just get this thing up and running. Docker Compose up. Let's just build. And I'll let this thing run for a moment and I'll resume recording when this is done. Okay, it looks like everything is up. It took a while and I had to repeat a few times because things got stuck. And things got stuck because I forgot in this directory here, I have some files I was supposed to delete before restarting things. These files were created from my previous experiments. I'll explain more what these things do later. But for now, everything is up and we should be able to go to our Kibana website now. Okay, so I went to the IP address of my Red Hat machine. You can see that there's SSL encrypted. In fact, let's just double check that I am on the right machine. Oh, okay, so there's a lot of these. Oh, here it is. Yep, so this is my Red Hat machine. So let's go back to the web browser and just click Advanced, Accept, Risk, and Continue. And we can log in first because we still need to configure a few things for the password. So the password, I'm going to open up my environment file. So there are some secrets in here, like this one here, these two here, right? But I'm going to scramble these after our setup so that they're never human visible again. But for now, just for the initial setup, let's log in. Okay, we're going to find that metric beat, file beat, and logstash are already set up and running, which I'll demonstrate later. But it's our fleet server that there are still a few additional steps we need to do. So we need to go to the settings area. And just like our last video, we're going to need to put in some information here. So this is going to point to our Docker container for Elasticsearch. And for the SSL information, if you recall from our last video, we have to get the CA fingerprint and the actual CA in here. And for convenience, I've created this little script here, which you can see is just copy the certificate authority from your Elasticsearch container, put into the temp directory, use this command to get the CA fingerprint, and just print the entire certificate authority. So that's what the script will do. You may need to replace your container name if you've changed your Docker cluster name. Okay, but I'll just run this. All right, so this is our CA fingerprint that I'll put in here. So again, this was all explained in my last video. For this, we're gonna need to format this. I'm gonna take a text pad. Actually, let me copy this first. Bring it over here and paste it in here. Here, let's make this a bit bigger. All right, so remember, spacing is extremely important or else things will just break. So I'm going to start by pressing tab on this, and we can't use tab, so I'm gonna copy, replace all tabs with 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, replace all. All right, so this should look the same. Now we take this, paste it in here, save and apply. Yes. In a moment, let's go to agents. All right, in a moment, our CPU and memory should show up. So I'm going to wait for a moment. All right, great. Looks like our memory is already showing up. I'm sure CPU will show up in a moment, but we might as well go over to the APM section to confirm that everything is working. There we go. We've got our Kibana service being read into APM, and our Python web app seems to be recognized, but let me try running a few things. All right, so just like our last video, our web app is running on port 8000. I can press refresh a few times. I can hit these buttons a few times. And we should start seeing some metrics flow into here. There might be a small delay. No, well, actually, you already see some of these actions being recorded here. All right, so we know the fleet server and APM is working fine. Let's just wait a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. So APM and fleet server is working fine. Let's see if metric beat is running. We can just go to stack monitoring quickly. Okay, just the fact that you see these cards here means that metric beat is running. Or if you want to be doubly sure, again, just click to observability overview. And we should see these 2 hosts coming from our Docker containers. Let's go back over here. Yep, so let's take a look at which ones these are. The 505 and the 66 DC. 505 and the 66 DC. All right, metric beat is up and running, and we can confirm that file beat is also okay. So what I'll do is I'm just going to grab just an entry from my cron log, maybe all the way at the bottom. Sure. No, I'll take this row, the final row, and let's do file beat ingest test.log. Paste it in here, and maybe I'll type a word at the end. I'll type the word piano. Okay, and let's actually just move that over to, or copy that over to the logstash directory as well, so we can test things there. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll go to the Discover tab, and let's create a new data view. I'll call this file beat. It's just easier to search with the Discover feature here. Okay, save. And let's look for the word piano. Yep, looks like we found it. So we know file beat's working. And let's take a look at logstash as well. So I'll type logstash. Whoops. Logstash. Save. And yep, you can see the word piano is in there as well. All right, so looks like every one of our services is up and running over here. And to confirm that they're all being used by their own user, let's go to the Users tab under Stack Management. I go to Users over here. You can see that I created a Kibana. Or actually, was it this one? Let me check again. Or actually, we can see first that there is a metric beat publisher and metric beat setup user that I created. There are 2 file beat users that I made, and I think I made a logstash user somewhere. Oh, here, logstash publish. That's the user responsible for the logstash container. Oh, actually, I didn't make a new Kibana user. I used the existing one, but I just changed the password. So every one of these services are using their own users and credentials, which are stored in the Keystore. And just to prove that that's the case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Elastic user. I'm going to change the password. So before it will change me, I'm going to change this to ABCD12345. ABCD12345. Change password. Okay, let's log out and make sure that our old password doesn't work. Change me. Good, it doesn't work. But if I use ABCD12345, I can log in. Great. And what I'm going to do then, now I can go into my environment file, and now these passwords don't mean anything anymore. I can change it to complete something else. They're not even going to be used. Yeah, I can change this. And this encryption key, I'm also going to change it to completely something different. And what I'm also going to do, oh, and by the way, you may need to leave the variables in here because I didn't, in my bash scripts, I haven't checked for nulls and empties and such. Instead, just change it to something that doesn't, change these values to something completely different. And what we can do is in our Docker Compose file, first thing I'm going to do is not use the Elasticsearch user. Let's go back up here. Elastic over here. We can completely delete this line if we want to, so it doesn't reset the password. Actually, I don't think it'll reset, but you don't even need to mention it going forward. The other thing we don't need are the fleet server. Let me hide this. Let's go down here. We don't need these lines anymore. In fact, I'll just delete it. We don't need these lines because those Kibana lines were responsible for doing the initial setup for the fleet server. And now that they're done, we can delete them. And therefore, none of these values matter anymore. Okay. This one is actually stored in the Kibana Keystore, so it's going to be safely guarded there. So let's restart this. Docker compose up. All right. So I'll resume recording once this has successfully restarted. All right, I think everything should be up and running. If I come back here, I hit refresh, it should still load. In fact, I'm just going to log out and log back in to make sure it's still using the new password, ABCD12345. Great. So it's not using that old change me password or whatever gobbledygook I just recently typed into my environment file. And we can see that metric beat should still be up and running because here under stack monitoring, I believe we should see all those different cards showing us the health of different services. Great. So this is all good. And if I were to update some files in the file beat and logstash ingestion area, so let's change the word piano to, let's say, harmonica. And let's do the logstash one as well. And let's change this to, let's say, chocolate. Okay. And we can confirm that file beat and logstash is working. Let's look for harmonic or chocolate first. Oh, wait, wrong data view. We want to go to logstash. Let's see if we can find chocolate. Chocolate. Great. And let's use file beat. And let's look for harmonica. All right, so all these services are still running despite the fact that I've changed the Elastic user's password. Any other service I forgot? Oh, APM. We should make sure APM is working. Let's go to observability, overview, and oh, not here. Under APM. Oh, am I under APM right now? Yes, but I'm under overview. Let me go over here, services. There we go. So Kibana is still loading data. Python web app probably is. Let's just hit refresh. Hit some buttons here. And let's limit the time frame to maybe last 2 minutes. Okay. Oh, looks like this happened a few seconds ago. So we know Fleet Server and APM and everything is working fine. All right, so we're getting more data. In the next video, I'll go in more detail, line by line, how I've set all this stuff up. But just to reassure you that on how things are working is you're going to see that there's all these shell script files here, and they are responsible for doing all the things in these green boxes over here. Right, so these containers or these services, these Docker containers or Docker services, they basically just run these shell scripts. And in these shell scripts, all I'm doing is, let me scroll down, making curl statements to the Elasticsearch API so that I can set up the necessary users with the necessary privileges, with the appropriate passwords and everything. And once those are done, they're actually stored in the Keystore. They're going to be found in a volume mounted area. I think the Kibana Keystore might be even more interesting to look at actually, because that one is bind mounted, and when something is bind mounted, you'll know exactly where the files are. But you can see here, I will actually store the Kibana passwords in the Kibana Keystore. And that can actually be found in this directory here, in this Keystore directory. I've temporarily made it 777 permissions, just made it open to everyone. I should probably explore what's the most appropriate permission setting for this directory a little bit later. But you can see in this Keystore folder, I have the Kibana Keystore here. If you attempt to read it, it's just gobbledygook, so hopefully it dissuades bad actors from truly interrogating this data to figure out what your Kibana password is. And likewise, I have a logstash Keystore. Right? Hopefully this will dissuade or discourage bad actors from fully interrogating what your logstash password is. And this is also the reason why at the beginning of this video, I had to restart I mentioned I had to restart my Docker project a few times because initially I completely forgot to delete these key stores from my previous implementations. And when I have old key stores in here, the Docker project gets stuck because it's trying to authenticate against a new Elasticsearch instance using these old credentials from a previous project. By completely clearing out these key stores, my Docker compose file will actually, it's not even Docker compose files. It's these setup files, Kibana setup, metric beat setup, and all these other setup scripts. I have this if statement up here, whereby if the key store exists, then don't bother trying to create a new user. But if the key store does not exist, then go ahead and create the new user with the appropriate privileges. Likewise, in the beats file here, you're going to see here, if a key store exists, or if it does not exist, then go ahead and create the necessary users. If the key store does exist, we just skip all this. Okay, so that's what's actually happening, and I'll try to explain in more detail in the next video. But for now, I just want to release this in case anyone finds this project useful.